This Let's Edit with Media Composer tutorial is brought to you by VideoGuys.com, the leading reseller of video editing and production equipment for more than 25 years. And by Boris Effects, a leading developer of visual effect plugins, titling, video editing, and workflow tools for broadcast, post-production, and film professionals. Hey everyone, Kevin P McAuliffe here, and I am back again with another Let's Edit with Avid Media Composer tutorial. And in this lesson, we are starting to work with footage inside of our Media Composer project, starting out by talking about the source browser. The source browser is going to be your conduit to get all of your footage into Avid Media Composer for you to consolidate or transcode before you start editing. Now, as I'm going to remind you at the start of each lesson, I want to talk about my footage partner, ArtGrid, artgrid.io. They have some absolutely fantastic stock footage that you can subscribe to pretty much fill any stock footage need you might have. And what I'm going to do in each lesson is feature some different footage that you may not even be aware that they have. But let me tell you something, you can download all of this footage plus thousands and thousands of other clips at artgrid.io. And the very cool thing is not only do they offer HD and higher 4K footage, but they also have log and raw footage as well that you can download and work with based on the subscription model that you subscribe to. All right, so let's Command or Alt and Tab into Avid Media Composer. And once we're here, I just have a single bin open and we're ready to get in and link to our footage. Now, before I do this, and as we go through and certain settings become relevant, I want to make sure I point them out. Now, we have talked briefly about the link setting in a previous lesson, but I do again just want to draw your attention to it here because I think it's important to note. Command Shift and the equal sign on the keyboard, Control Shift and the equal sign for all my Windows friends out there. Let's head over to our user settings and let's come down here to link representing what we do in the source browser. Now you'll see that by default quality is set to disabled. I'm actually going to leave that as disabled right here. I'm going to come to volume mounting. You'll notice again this is for specific things like enable legacy XD-Cam import, automatically link to volumes, etc., etc. Really where we want to focus on is in our link options. Now we did talk about this before where we can get in and choose multi-channel audio, the start time option for broadcast WAV files. Most importantly in here is the alpha channel section. This is where if you're bringing in, for example, a ProRes 4444 file and you want to make sure that when you link to it, it has the embedded alpha channel that you added before, this is where you can set that. You'll also note down the bottom here, properties of new clips for reformatting options. You can set that here. And if you happen to be working with SD clips, you can also tell Media Composer if necessary, to use 16:9 aspect ratio for SD clips. All right, so again, keep that in the back of your head if you happen to need to jump in and adjust some of these settings. I'm just going to close the settings window. Now, I'm going to right click, I'm going to come to input, and you might think that at some point in our lessons, I'm going to talk about the import media window because this is a window that we've had forever in Media Composer. I've used it for years and years and years and years. I'm actually not going to discuss it at all in any training, and I forbid you to go in and to access importing media from here. Now, I jokingly say that because what we're going to be doing is when we import media, we can actually do it all from within the source browser. You can do everything from one nice contained location. Now, you also have the ability in here to capture from tape if necessary, if that and I'm not going to say that, if you happen to still be doing that, lots of editors out there are still capturing from tape. You can also link to a volume 4 export as well as importing EDLs here. But for what we're doing, the source browser is where we're going. I'm just going to drag it up here to the upper left-hand corner of the interface. Now, before we even get in and talk about how we actually link to files, I want to talk about a couple things that I think are exceptionally important. First, many people think that they can just start linking to media, get it into a bin, and start editing with it. I highly recommend that you never, ever, ever do that. It's just a horrible way to edit inside a Media Composer. The source browser and the link to feature was never designed to do that. Now you might be thinking, well, Kev, I can link to stuff, I can drop it into a timeline and start working with it. Why shouldn't I edit with it? What's important to keep in mind about why this feature was originally added was to get larger than HD footage into Media Composer so that you could transcode it and work with it in an HD timeline, whether it was for offline purposes or for whatever. It was never really designed as a great way to get in and edit. I find AMA Link 2 clips, in a lot of cases depending on your drive, just to be very clunky to work with, especially if you start getting into larger than HD formats. That's why this window is really designed as the conduit to get media into your bin to then choose what you want to do with it at that point, whether you want to consolidate it or whether you want to transcode it. Now, that is its own dedicated beast that I'm actually going to talk about in our next lesson. I've dedicated an entire lesson just to consolidating and transcoding and understanding when to use one over the other. All right? So let's just focus on the bottom part of this window for right now, right here. So first thing I'm going to point out, I did mention before jokingly that I forbid everyone from using the import feature inside of the file and inside of import media, because you'll notice right here we have the ability to choose whether we want to link or to import. Now you'll notice we have the little gearbox right here, and if I click on it, it actually brings me right to my link settings. So it's actually a little bit of a shortcut to avoid having to Command Shift and equal sign, Control Shift and Windows sign, or Control Shift and equal sign for all my Windows friends out there. And if I come down and say cancel and I switch over to import and I select the same gear, you'll now see that we have our import settings window, much like many Media Composer editors are familiar with working with. Now, let's not even talk about that for right now. Let's put that on the side for right now. Let's just talk about link. Now, down here at the bottom, you'll see the target bin is the only bin that I actually currently have open, but I could actually create a new bin from here if I wanted to. I could even create a bin based on the folder that we happen to be looking at. And once we're ready to go, I could simply say link. Now you'll notice up here in the source browser settings, if I double click on a clip, it's going to load it into the source monitor by default. I could also have the source browser just link or import that clip based on what we have selected right here. All right. Now, a couple other options. We can close the source browser after linking or importing. I normally leave that unselected. I like to decide when I close the source browser. And we can also clear the source monitor upon closing the source browser, which I prefer to have it do, so this way there's no renegade media floating around that I may have double clicked on and brought up, but I don't necessarily want to import. All right, so let me just expand the window out here just a little bit. I want to keep this nice and zoomed in so that everyone can see exactly what we're doing here. You'll notice that we can expand our window in and out, and what we're going to do is we're going to head into the folder where I have that footage that I showed you in the introduction. Let me double click on media. Let me come down to footage right here. I'm going to come into ArtGrid, and I'm going to come into my source browser lesson footage. Now, by default, I have everything in list view. Now, list view is great, you know, if you happen to be jumping in, bringing everything in that's contained inside of a folder on your hard drive, but there may be situations where you want to get in and actually see the thumbnails of the clips that you will be working with. Now, once I select the thumbnails, I can now get in. I can adjust their size here. What I can also do is I can actually click on a clip. It's a little hard to see with this one, but if you look at my frog's throat here, you'll see it's actually moving. It's a little bit easier to see here. You can actually scan through clips inside of the source browser very quickly and very easily. All right. Of course, you also have the ability to get in and search for clips if you wanted to. We can also adjust the zoom it all the way back. We can also zoom it in super huge, as you can see. And once we're actually ready to bring a clip in, all I need to do is to simply either select one and select all of them. I'm just going to bring my window back up here, and I'm going to come down and say link. Now, once I do, unless you were looking at the bin back here, it might not be readily apparent that Media Composer actually brought that footage in. But it did, and you'll see that if I come back here, I'm just going to close the source browser for a second. Here are those clips that we were just looking at. Now, what's important to keep in mind is I have a relatively fast drive connected. This is ProRes HD, ProRes HQ, 1920 by 1080. And you'll see, it's actually not exactly the easiest to see it on these clips here. Let's go to the silhouette. There we go. Very nice. All right. Now again, this is fine on a clip-by-clip basis, but I wouldn't want to have a timeline with 1,000 linked to clips in it. You know, especially if somebody's going to move a clip or, you know, unplug a drive, that's just going to lead you to no end of problems. I'm just going to delete this footage. What's important to keep in mind is that because we have not converted any media to actual Avid media, all we're doing is just removing the link that we had just created in this bin. So I'm going to say okay, but before I do that, I just want to draw your attention to the icon that's located here right beside the name of the clip. You'll notice that it has a master clip icon and a little link icon as well, so that I know that these clips are all linked to media. I'm just going to say okay. We're going to head back to the source browser now. There we go. Let's bring this up here like such. And if you're old school like me and you still like to get in and import, no problem. You can simply navigate back to import. You can choose the drive that you're going to be going to. Choose the format you want to be importing. If you need to get in and make any adjustments to your import settings, like the alpha channel, the color levels, and even potentially the still frame duration, you can do all of that right here. And when you're ready to go, you can simply click import and import into the target bin. Now, something else that's exceptionally important for me to point out. I'm just going to switch back to list view for a second here. And I think I'm going to expand the window out. Okay. Media Composer, was it a couple versions ago, when they implemented the Catalina update, that may very well have been 2020.4, they introduced the Universal Media Engine inside of Media Composer, which is basically what is taking Media Composer's dependency off QuickTime. All right. Now, it still is in its infancy. And anybody that's working in Catalina, again, this is just for Mac users using Catalina, you may run into issues where specific type of media files are not supported. I believe MP3 is one of them right off the bat. In a lot of cases, what you might just have to do is just import MP3s, and if that doesn't work, you can simply just convert them in another application and then bring them in that way as a WAV file or an AIFF file. What's important to keep in mind is that Avid is working on the Universal Media Engine, and the plan is to keep updating it with more support for more file types as we move along. Now, you might not even know that you can actually tell Media Composer what plugin you want to use by right-clicking on the clip and coming down and saying link with. You'll see you can link with the Universal Media Engine, you can link with QuickTime, or you can auto-detect. So I could actually come down and say link with QuickTime, and you'll see that this is now going to be brought in using the QuickTime plugin. All right. Now, ideally, you're going to stick with the Universal Media Engine unless you start running into problems again, like with an MP3. But I believe in any version that's not Catalina, you should not have a problem bringing in those types of files, assuming they were supported before. All right, now before we wrap up, I just want to talk briefly about the top bar across where all of your footage is, as well as a couple of navigation tips. First of all, you'll notice that if I right-click up here on the top bar where I have the different column names, I can actually choose what columns are going to be displayed. It's a little bit of a truncated version of what we have in bins, but you can actually get in and just sort of minimize this right down to the actual parameters that you need to see to get this footage in there. For example, if I don't need to see the audio bit depth or the format, I can deselect all of those and they'll disappear from the end just to streamline this entire window. Also, over here on the left, you'll see that we have a very easy navigation tree for us to easily get in and track down any footage that we need to find. And the beauty part is that if I know that I'm always coming back to this footage folder to find footage, I can actually mark it as a favorite. So you'll notice I can click on favorite right there, and now that favorite will always be displayed. So that way when I come into the media folder, I can just simply navigate down. Oh, look at that. There's the favorite folder, so I know that's always my footage. I can get quick access to it. You'll also notice that we have some options up here that we can click on to enable folders as media volumes, again to add a favorite. We can also collapse all the directories, head back to the home folder, and we have access to very basic folder navigation, being able to step up or step back in your folder chain. Now for me personally, I don't really use a lot of this, even the favorites, because I'm constantly going to different folders, but it's just something that I wanted to point out if you're new to the source browser and you just want to get in and know what each one of these windows does. Now, remember, I did get in and add that favorite, so at any point I can simply click on the favorites tab. There's that footage folder, and now I have quick access to the clips or folders that I had favorited. Alright, now as we're wrapping up, I want to remind you to check out our sponsors, Video Guys, for all of your Avid software and hardware, as well as thousands of other products that you can check out over at videoguys.com. And I also want to give a big shout out to the team at Boris Effects, makers of Continuum, Sapphire, and Mocha. And don't forget to use that coupon code of MC101 to get 10% off your next Continuum purchase. If you like this tutorial, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and don't forget, if you have any questions, you have any comments, or you have any tutorial requests, don't hesitate to send them to me at kevinpmcauliffe@gmail.com. This has been Kevin P. McAuliffe. Thanks a lot for watching.